In lessons 1 and 2, we learned that we had good reason to think that implicit bias could alter our decisions and behavior, at least a little bit, and over the past 15 years, such evidence has been accumulating from laboratories across the globe. For instance, implicit bias has been found to predict which resumes get called back for interviews, more negative evaluations of ambiguous actions or performance by African Americans, more negative evaluations of confident, aggressive, and ambitious women in certain hiring conditions, how we read the friendliness of facial expressions, awkward body language in interview settings, indeed the greater likelihood that civilians will mistakenly shoot an unarmed African American as compared to an unarmed white individual in a video game simulation. In 2009, scientists conducted a meta-analysis that summarized all the research on whether the best-known measure of implicit bias, called the implicit association test, predicted behavior in socially sensitive interactions, such as judgments across race and gender. After examining over 120 reports involving nearly 15,000 subjects, they found a correlation of R equals 0.236 between implicit bias and behavior. Notably, implicit bias was a better predictor of discriminatory behavior than measures of explicit bias. Now, unless you're statistically trained, you probably have no idea what an R value is. It's meant to measure how much a straight line can be fit between some x and y variables, such as implicit bias and discriminatory behavior. 1, or -1, is a perfect linear fit. 0 means no fit at all. In any event, social scientists consider an R value of 0.236 to be a low correlation, a small-sized effect. And you know what? When a team of scientists extremely hostile to the implicit bias work did their own meta-analysis a few years later, using slightly different methods, they got an even lower R value of 0.15. Okay, what does all this mean for those of us less statistically inclined? Maybe some comparison to medical common sense could help. Let's start with smoking. We tell our kids not to smoke, and for good reason. A smoker, as compared to a non-smoker, is about 11 times more likely to get lung cancer. But when translated into an R value, the correlation between smoking and lung cancer is just R equals 0.08. The correlation is so small because most people don't get lung cancer, whether they smoke or not. Does this mean we should stop frightening kids about smoking and lung cancer? What about low-level lead exposure and reduced childhood IQ? The correlation is just R equals 0.12, which is lower than the correlation found by the research team hostile to this branch of science. I don't know about you, but I'm still not going to let my daughter drink leaded water simply because scientists assure me it's only a small effect. But if I'm committed to building equity for all, I can't just care about myself and my family, right? Still want more? Interested in the underlying science or have questions about how we measure implicit bias? All that and more in Lesson 4, Explicit versus Implicit Bias.